If you want to understand where America is heading, stop looking at one headline and start looking at all of them together. Today's stories are connected. We have a Supreme Court decision on immigration. We have a Texas continuing to grow on a global trade hub. We have a poll showing Americans have lost confidence in the direction of the country, and we have a constitutional fight over the Second Amendment. We have a new question about facial recognition and privacy due to AI, and we have a humanitarian disaster in Venezuela. And every one of those stories points towards one question: what kind of country does America want to become? Today we're going to break all of that down, separate the facts from the noise, and look at what these headlines mean for your family, your community, and your country. Before we begin, if you're looking for a quicker way to stay informed every day, check out my Patreon Daily Debrief. Every weekday I cover the biggest headlines in a shorter format, along with the weather across major Texas cities, a stock market update, and the biggest national and international and local stories. If you enjoy this podcast, but you want the highlights in about 10 minutes, that's a great option. So right now you can get 50% off your first month with the code INDEPENDENCE. Instead of $5, your first month is only $2.50. And if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, I'd love to have you there. But let's get started with today's topics. Before we jump into politics, let's begin with something closer to home. Corpus Christi received some encouraging news this week. Recent rainfall pushed the projected level 1 water emergency back until September of 2027. And a month ago, city officials expected restrictions much sooner, and they were much negative. But rain gave South Texas breathing room, and that's good news for families, businesses, farmers, and industry. At the same time, nobody should confuse temporary relief with permanent solution and just using reservoirs. So population growth continues, industry continues expanding, and manufacturing continues growing. Water demand rises with every new investment, and good leadership prepares for drought and during rainy years instead of waiting until reservoirs fall again. So this story shows something simple. Planning matters, infrastructure matters, local government matters, national politics often receives your attention. The president often receives your attention, but yet local decisions affect your daily life more often than Washington does. Speaking of growth, let's stay in Corpus Christi because another story develops attention across Texas. So DP World entered exclusive negotiations to develop a container terminal at the port of Corpus Christi. Most people hear that the word port and immediately think ships. They stop there. The real story goes much deeper. Ports determine how products move around the world. They attract investment from investors, and they create jobs for everyone, and they lower transportation costs. They connect local economies with global markets. Corpus Christi already serves as one of America's largest energy export hubs. Oil, liquefied natural gas, petrochemicals, and refined fuels always leave South Texas from markets across the globe. Expanding container capacity opens another chapter for the region. People often ask that why companies choose Texas over states with larger populations. The answer usually comes down to Texas, to taxes, regulation, infrastructure, and geography. Texas sits close to Mexico, close to the Gulf, and close to major interstate highways. Businesses follow efficiency. Money follows stability. Ports follow trade, and trade creates opportunity. So none of this happens overnight. Projects like these require years of planning, billions of dollars, and cooperation between private companies and public officials. If this agreement moves forward, Corpus Christi strengthens its position as one of the country's most important economic gateways. Now let's move into the biggest national story of the day. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in favor of allowing the Trump administration to move forward with ending temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of Haitians and several thousand Syrians while legal challenges continue. Before people react emotionally, let's explain what this means. Temporary protected status, often called TPS, exists for extraordinary circumstances, war, natural disasters, political instability. Congress created the program so people already inside the United States would not face deportation into dangerous conditions. The key word is temporary. Over time, temporary programs often become long-term realities, and administrations from both political parties extended protections again and again. The Trump administration argues temporary means temporary. Opponents argue humanitarian concerns still exist in many of these countries, but the Supreme Court did not settle every legal question forever. The court allowed the administration to move forward while litigation continues. More importantly, the majority reinforced something fundamental about American government. Immigration policy belongs primarily to the elected executive branch unless Congress changes the law. So judges interpret statutes, presidents enforce them, Congress writes them, and those constitutional boundaries matter regardless of who occupies the White House. Immigration has become one of the defining issues of this generation because every sovereign nation controls who enters its borders. Without borders, citizenship loses meaning, and we move more towards globalism. Without enforcement, laws become suggestions. At the same time, every immigration discussion involves human beings with families, jobs, and churches and communities. A much more mature debate recognizes both realities instead of pretending only one side exists. But immigration is nonpartisan. So many politicians promise simple answers, but there are none. America needs secure borders. America also needs legal immigration, not illegal immigration. So America's economy depends upon workers, entrepreneurs, engineers, physicians, and innovators from around the world. Those ideas do not conflict. A country enforces immigration law while maintaining a lawful immigration system. Those two goals belong together and they are not divided. So this brings us to another headline that deserves attention. New polling shows that 77% of Americans believe that the Founding Fathers would feel disappointed with the nation's current direction. Think about that number. More than 3 out of 4 Americans believe the people who signed the Declaration of Independence would look at today's country with disappointment. Why is that? The answers differ depending on who you ask. Conservatives point towards declining civic education, growing national debt, weakened border security, and expanding federal bureaucracy. Progressives point towards inequality, political division, and social issues, which are not clearly defined. But independent voters often point towards dysfunction itself. Endless partisan conflict, declining trust, institutions losing credibility. And regardless of political affiliation, one point stands out. Trust has become America's missing resource. Trust in Congress remains low. Trust in the legacy media remains low. Trust in, much of these universities have fallen. Trust in corporations have declined. Even confidence in elections divides people depending upon political preference. A republic depends upon public trust, and the Constitution alone does not preserve freedom. Citizens preserve freedom. Some people spent decades explaining a simple truth. Every decision involves trade-offs. Every policy produces benefits and costs. Mature societies acknowledge both instead of pretending that perfect solutions exist. Abraham Lincoln, my favorite Republican, understood another truth. The Constitution survives only if citizens remain committed to preserving it. Laws matter, and character matters more. People sometimes ask whether America's best years have already passed. History argues against pessimism, and the United States survived Civil War, 2 World Wars, economic depression, Cold War, nuclear threats, terrorist attacks on 9/11, financial crises. The country endured because institutions adapted while constitutional principles remained intact. So problems deserve attention, and despair solves nothing. Next, we're going to examine the Department of Justice challenge to California's firearm restrictions, the growing debate over facial recognition technology, and the devastating earthquake in Venezuela, and why one small health study says something larger about modern American life. So let's turn to another legal battle that has implications far beyond California. The Department of Justice warned California that its handgun restrictions, including limits affecting Glock pistols, and the state's handgun roster requirements violate the Second Amendment. California's government and Gavin Newsom argues that these laws improve public safety by restricting access to certain firearms and requiring additional safety measures. This Justice Department is showing that the Constitution protects access to firearms that are commonly owned for lawful purposes, and the recent Supreme Court decisions have strengthened that interpretation. And this case represents a broader shift in the constitutional law. For years, many firearm regulations received broad judicial deference. Recent Supreme Court rulings have changed the legal standard, and courts now ask whether modern firearm restrictions align with the nation's historical tradition of gun regulation. That framework places greater weight on the constitutional text and history than policy debates alone. So whether you support stricter gun laws or broader Second Amendment protections, one principle should unite everyone. Constitutional rights deserve consistent application. Rights do not change based on who holds the office or which political party controls Washington, D.C. The Constitution protects speech you disagree with, and protects religious freedom for people who worship differently than you do. It protects due process for defendants accused of crimes, and it also protects the right to keep and bear arms. Those protections become meaningful only when applied consistently. That leads directly to another court decision from New Jersey involving facial recognition technology. The state's highest court ruled prosecutors must disclose when facial recognition software played a role during criminal investigations. On the surface, this sounds technical. In reality, it touches one of the biggest debates of the next decade. Artificial intelligence is becoming part of the everyday policing, and software helps identify suspects, organize evidence, and analyze enormous amounts of information in minutes instead of weeks. Used responsibly, these tools help solve violent crimes more efficiently. They help investigators identify dangerous criminals and protect innocent people. The concern begins when technology becomes a substitute for evidence instead of a tool that supports it. Facial recognition systems are not perfect. Lighting changes, camera angles matter, databases contain errors. Human review remains essential if prosecutors rely on software during an investigation. Defendants deserve the opportunity to understand how that technology influenced the case, and transparency strengthens confidence in the justice system. Hiding investigative methods without good reason weakens that public trust. So this debate will continue far beyond New Jersey. Artificial intelligence will affect policing, education, medicine, finance, transportation, and national security. The challenge for lawmakers is finding a balance between innovation and constitutional protections. America has always embraced technological progress. The Constitution still sets limits on government power, regardless of how advanced technology becomes. Let's shift overseas for a moment. Venezuela suffered one of the deadliest natural disasters in its modern history after two major earthquakes struck within seconds of one another. Hundreds of people lost their lives. Many more suffered injuries. Rescue teams continue searching collapsed buildings while damaged roads, power outages, and communication failures slowed the relief efforts. And natural disasters remind us that politics stops when the human tragedy begins. And families searching through rubble are not thinking about ideology. They are trying to find their loved ones. Churches, charities, rescue organizations, and governments across the world have begun sending assistance. The United States joined international relief efforts because humanitarian leadership reflects American values. We compete with other nations. We also help people facing catastrophic disasters. Those ideas are compatible. One lesson stands out from the strategies like this, and infrastructure matters. Emergency planning matters. Building standards matter. Governments often receive attention during elections, yet emergency preparation rarely becomes a campaign issue until a disaster strikes. Good leadership prepares long before the headlines appear. Before we finish, I want to talk about something much simpler. Researchers found that taking a 5-minute walk every hour reduced fatigue and improved mood without reducing work performance. At first glance, this seems like one of those small lifestyle stories that fills space between bigger headlines, but I think it says something much larger. Modern life encourages people to sit for hours. Students sit in classrooms, office workers sit behind computers, drivers sit in traffic. Even entertainment keeps people sitting. Over time, those habits affect physical health, attention, and energy. Discipline rarely begins with dramatic changes. It begins with small habits repeated every day. Walk around the office, take the stairs, step outside for fresh air, stretch between meetings. Those decisions seem insignificant in the moment, but months later they become meaningful. The same principle applies to finances, education, faith, marriage, parenting, and citizenship. Small decisions repeated constantly shape your future more than occasional bursts of motivation. Looking back at today's story, one theme connects nearly to all of them. Institutions matter, local government matters because water infrastructure affects your community, economic policy matters because ports create jobs and strengthen regional growth. Constitutional law matters because it defines the limits of government authority. Immigration policy matters because every sovereign nation determines how its laws are enforced. Technology matters because artificial intelligence is becoming part of everyday life. Personal discipline matters because healthy habits influence your ability to serve your family and your community. As conservatives, it's easy to spend every day redacting or reacting to the headlines, but we should also ask a different question. What solutions strengthen families, protect constitutional government, encourage economic growth, reward personal responsibility, and preserve the freedoms handed down through generations? Those questions matter more than every single news cycle. One final thought. Politics changes. Administrations come and go. Supreme Court's majorities change over time. Markets rise and fall. The values that sustain a free society remain more than durable. Faith, family, honest work, personal responsibility, respect for the Constitution, respect for the rule of law. Those principles existed before today's headlines, and they will matter long after tomorrow's headlines and replace them. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with someone who needs or wants more than a 30-second headline and social media outrage. Stay informed, read beyond the headline, challenge your own assumptions, seek the facts before forming your own conclusions. Until next time, take care of your family, take care of your community, and as always, God bless.